Again, we're going to take a look at the layout tabs, and we'll just look at those from the left to the right. And the first layout tab is Notes. Now, when we meet with a contact and there is information that we need to remember about that meeting, or maybe we just talked to them on the phone, and there's information we need to remember, but there isn't another place in the database to put that information, then we take a note. So, for example, if we want to take a note that they absolutely love golf or that they absolutely love chocolate, then we can make that note. Now, we can actually search the database later on for people who love golf or love chocolate, and we'll look at that later on. Right now, we're just focusing on what the tabs are. History. History has to do with what have I been doing with this contact. In other words, what kind of correspondence have we had? What kind of calls have I made? What's been going on with this particular contact? In this case, we're just looking at Chris's history basically with himself. But if we focused in on another contact, if I were to come up here and go into the menu bar and click to the next contact, now we're looking at another contact. Now we're looking at another, not Chris, but another contact within the same database. So now we're looking at the capability of being able to record history of what's going on with this contact. Activities. What have I done in regards to phone calls? What have I done in regards to meetings? What have I done in regards to to-dos? Whereas history is everything that has to do with any kind of correspondence that I sent out, this activities is specifically three things: calls, to-dos, and meetings. Opportunities, what sales opportunities have I set up? Groups and companies, what groups and companies or subgroups are they a member of? And we'll talk more about that later on. Secondary contacts. Secondary contacts are people that they're not a person that you would necessarily call a decision maker. They're not a person that you are going to send correspondence to, but they are an influencer with that contact. In other words, when you call that contact, there might be somebody else that you also want to touch base with. Maybe their assistant, maybe a person that is in shipping that can help get your product out. In other words, they're not somebody that is a decision maker, but they are somebody that you want to keep track of their information. We'll talk about how to work with secondary contacts later on. Documents. What documents have I attached to this? Let's go back to Chris and see if there's some documents here as well. Yes, we've got a couple of documents here. Conference, document, a Canadian provinces for importing.txt. These are documents that are attached to his record so that I could just double-click on that document, or double-click right here and open up that document. We'll look at that later on as well. Contact information. The contact information is the information as far as when it was created, who created it, when it was last edited, whether it's a public or a private contact. In this case, Chris Huffman, it's grayed out because obviously he's not going to be a private contact to himself. But if we looked at another contact that's not Chris, you'll see then that public and private, that we can choose whether we want this to be a public or a private contact. This comes into play more when you allow someone else to manage your database. In other words, if Chris has an assistant and allows that assistant to manage his database, then he may want some things in the database to be private, where the assistant can't manage those or can't even see those records. We'll talk more about how that works later on. Then there's user fields. Notice that these are not defined, but we can define them within our own database. In other words, we can say we're going to use user 1 for this particular field. We're going to use user 2 for this particular. In other words, we're going to define these fields so that they contain the information that we want. Maybe we want to have each employee's license plate number on there so that when somebody parks in the boss's parking place, they can easily be found. So there's many different examples that an organization might use to define their own user fields, and we'll look at user fields later on as well. And then home address information. In other words, not the business information for this particular contact, but instead the home address information, so that we have that on hand as well. Obviously, this is not information that you'd want to keep for everyone, but it's more personal information that you might keep for your very best prospects or for employees, depending on how you're using ACT to manage your time. Personal email versus their business email, maybe even their messenger ID, their spouse's name, their birthday. So, as you can see, the layout tabs give us a tremendous amount of flexibility in regards to the database. So, just as a quick review, these are the layout tabs. These are the menu bar items, and as you'll remember, when we click on one and it opens up, and we'll be looking at all these different things that are in here, all these different features that are in here, and once it opens up, then we can go across and it'll open those up as well. And then what is this called? It's called the navigation bar now. It used to be called the view bar. On the view bar, we can make these icons smaller if we choose to. If we right click and then click on small icons, then we can make small icons. We could even use the regular Windows tools to slide this over so that all we have are just small icons. So it depends on how you want to use the system as to how you would arrange your screen. But the main thing that I want you to see here is that we have a great amount of flexibility within the system because of all the different parts. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start taking a closer look at some of the different parts. And the first thing we're going to take a closer look at is what a contact record really is. That's next.